Welcome to the Heartbreak Chronicles, where every story is a raw reflection of life. Hit that subscribe button to stay tuned, give us a like to show your support, and share this episode with your friends. Don't forget to leave a comment and let us know what you think. Now, let's dive into today's story. Jack Thompson and Emily Wilson's story began during their college years. It was a sunny fall day, and 23-year-old Jack was struggling with his dual degree, majoring in electrical engineering and computer science. He is tall and straight, with a gleam of wisdom in his eyes, which is a mark left by his long-time study of technology. Emily, 21, on the other hand, is a beautiful, gentle girl focused on her beloved biology research. Fate seems to have ordained their meeting long ago. On that day, Jack had just finished a complex programming project and walked into the library, tired, to check out some circuit design materials. Just as he was concentrating on the bookshelf, a slight shriek caught his attention. He turned to see Emily on her tiptoes, trying to reach a book high above her, but always coming up just short. Jack smiled and walked up, easily removing the book and handing it to Emily. "Thanks," Emily said with a slight blush. "I've tried several times." Jack politely responds, "You're welcome. Glad to help. As an engineer, problem solving is my specialty." It was such a simple encounter that started their story. In the days that followed, they often ran into each other in the library. At first, they simply nodded their heads in greeting, and gradually, they began to talk, sharing their respective learning experiences and life goals. Jack is attracted to Emily's intelligence and tenderness, while Emily admires Jack's creativity and problem-solving skills. However, Jack's career as an engineer poses a considerable challenge to their relationship. From time to time, he needs to work on important projects, and sometimes he can't go home after being in the lab for days. Before each time he starts a new project, he sends Emily a message promising to come back on time to be with her. Emily, on the other hand, spends every long night clutching the homemade smart bracelet Jack gave her in anticipation of his good news. Finally, when Jack was 25 years old, they were married in a simple and cozy ceremony. On that day, Jack wore a neat suit and Emily wore a white wedding gown, and both of them had a vision of the future in their eyes. Shortly after the wedding, Jack got a job at a well-known tech company, which meant more challenges, but also a more stable life. Married life was uneventful and happy. Jack works on some of his personal projects at home in addition to his busy schedule at the office, while Emily devotes herself to taking care of her family. They soon welcomed two lovely daughters, Sophie and Olivia. The arrival of the children brought endless joy to the family and made Jack and Emily appreciate each other even more. However, as time goes on, Emily begins to feel a twinge of unease. She loves her family, but deep down, she longs to get back into the workforce and realize her worth. When she cautiously expresses this idea to Jack, she is pleasantly surprised to find her husband fully supportive of her decision. "Honey," Jack said gently, "you've given so much to this family, now it's time to pursue your own dreams. I'll support you as always." Emily was moved to tears as she hugged her husband tightly, her heart filled with gratitude. With Jack's encouragement, Emily soon found a job at a lab affiliated with a local university. Every morning, Jack drops the kids off at school before heading off to work, while Emily devotes herself to the research she loves. 10 years have slipped by and Sophie and Olivia have grown up and started school. At this point, Emily felt it was time to return to work full-time. After conferring with Jack, she decided to accept the full-time position offered to her at the lab. Jack readily agreed, and he adjusted his work schedule to make sure he could take care of the children's daily routine while Emily worked overtime. "We're a team," Jack often says to Emily, "and your success is my success." This support warms Emily's heart and makes her better and better at her job. Jack even used his engineering skills to develop several efficiency-enhancing applets for Emily's lab, which earned Emily kudos among her colleagues. However, fate always likes to play jokes. Just when they thought life would stay this calm and beautiful, an unexpected night changed everything completely. It was a February weekend, and Jack and Emily had the rare opportunity to go out to dinner and dance with their neighborhood friends. They both looked forward to this rare opportunity to relax, not realizing that it would become a turning point in their marriage. That night, the moment they stepped into the ballroom, No one could have imagined that the gears of fate had begun to turn. In the midst of the laughter and the haze of lights, an unexpected guest appears that will change the course of Jack and Emily's lives forever. And this, just the beginning of their story. On a weekend night in February, the smell of impending spring was in the air. Jack and Emily's long-awaited casual night out has finally arrived. Together with a couple of close friends from the neighborhood, they went to the most prestigious dance hall in the city center, the Starlight. Emily was extraordinarily moving tonight, wearing a figure-hugging navy blue dress with her long hair pulled back to reveal an elegant neckline. Jack, on the other hand, went against the grain and changed into a dark gray suit, looking handsome and dashing. The two walked hand in hand into the ballroom, where neon lights intertwined and flickered and the music was lush and melodic. Just as they were dancing, the atmosphere in the ballroom suddenly became agitated. There was a commotion from the crowd as someone exclaimed, "Oh my God, it's Mark Stevens." Jack and Emily stopped dancing and looked curiously toward the entrance. Only a tall, lanky figure appeared in the doorway, none other than Mark Stevens, the most famous rugby star in the area. He was flanked by a few friends and looked spirited. Emily and a few of the other ladies couldn't help but look at him more. Jack noticed that Emily's gaze lingered on Mark for a significantly longer period of time, and a wave of displeasure surged through him. He was about to open his mouth to say something when Mark Stevens was already walking toward them. "This beautiful lady, may I have the honor of inviting you to a dance?" Mark said courteously, completely ignoring Jack, who was standing by. Emily's eyes lit up, and she looked over at Jack as if asking for his opinion. Jack frowned and said in a forceful tone, "I'm sorry, we were just about to leave. Emily, let's go." However, Emily didn't seem to listen to Jack. She smiled at Mark and said, "I'm honored." Then turning to Jack, "Honey, just one dance, okay?" Jack felt a surge of anger. He grabbed Emily's arm and whispered, "Emily, you can't do this. We're husband and wife." Emily, however, gently broke away from Jack's hand. "Jack, don't be so petty. It's just a dance." With that, she followed Mark towards the center of the dance floor. Jack stood still, feeling both angry and hurt. He watched as Emily twirled in Mark's arms, a big smile on her face that he hadn't seen in a long time. After a dance, Emily doesn't return, but continues to dance with Mark, seemingly completely oblivious to the fact that her husband is still waiting in the wings. Time passed and Jack's anger grew. He walked over to the bar and sipped one stiff drink after another while keeping his eyes on Emily and Mark on the dance floor. After about an hour, Jack finally relented. He stumbled toward the dance floor, trying to pull Emily back. However, when he reaches the edge of the dance floor, he realizes that both Emily and Mark are gone. Jack panicked. He looked around for Emily but found nothing. That's when he heard his friends around him whisper, "Did you guys see Emily leave with that football star?" It was unbelievable. The words hit Jack like a hammer, hard on his heart. He felt a wave of vertigo and almost stood still. His friends gathered around and asked with concern, "Jack, are you okay? Do you want us to help you find Emily?" Jack took a deep breath and managed to squeeze out a bitter smile. "No need. It looks like our marriage is over." With that, he turned and left the ballroom, leaving a group of dumbfounded friends behind. On the drive home, Jack's mind kept replaying images of Emily and Mark dancing and them leaving together. He felt more angry and betrayed than ever before, and the rage in his heart grew hotter and hotter. Back at home, Jack sat in the darkened living room, staring at the wedding photos on the wall. As the minutes ticked by, his eyes gradually became cold and determined. Just then, a terrible thought formed in Jack's mind. He stood up, walked to his study, and began searching quickly for something on his computer. The blue light of the screen reflected on his grim face, and a cold glint flashed in Jack's eyes. "Since you chose betrayal," Jack muttered, "don't blame me for being ruthless." With this dangerous plan in mind, Jack begins his preparations. He checked out Mark Stevens' public itinerary, studied the terrain near his home, and even started preparing some of the tools he might need to use. Jack's heart was full of contradictions. On the one hand, he still loves Emily and doesn't want to believe that she would really betray him. On the other hand, he feels a deep sense of betrayal and anger, and wants to get revenge badly. This contradiction tore at his sanity, causing him more pain than he had ever felt before. It was late at night, and Emily still hadn't come back. Jack sat in his study, his fingers hanging over the keyboard, debating whether or not to act on it. He knew that once he started, there was no turning back. Maybe it's all just a misunderstanding, Jack tried to convince himself. Maybe Emily is just confused and will be back soon to explain. But whenever he thought about the image of Emily and Mark being close, reason was drowned out by jealousy and anger. Ultimately, Jack makes a decision that will change their lives forever. He started working on his plan to take action against Mark Stevens. And this night is destined to be a turning point in the destiny of Jack, Emily, and all those involved. Jack's plan was taking shape in his mind, like a precision machine, each cog biting precisely. He knew he was about to step into uncharted territory, a world of danger and regret. But at the moment, anger and a sense of betrayal overwhelmed all reason. That night, when Jack returned home alone, Emily still hadn't returned. The clock in the living room ticked, each second like a small hammer striking Jack's nerves. He sat on the couch, his cell phone clutched in his hand, hoping to hear from Emily. But the cell phone screen stayed dark, as did his mood at the moment. Jack made several calls to Emily, but they went unanswered. Each time he heard the voicemail beep, his anger increased. This feeling of neglect and betrayal was eating away at his sanity. He thought back to the way Emily had looked when she danced with Mark Stevens in the ballroom, that big smile on her face that he hadn't seen in a long time, and it all made his heart ache. Finally, at midnight, Jack made his decision. He stood up and walked slowly but surely to the garage. In a pile of dusty clutter, he found the old baseball bat. It was something he had prepared years ago for self-preservation, not realizing it would come in handy today. Jack gripped the baseball bat and felt its weight, conflicted and agonized inside. He stood in the garage and thought back to his time with Emily. Their first date, the shy smile on Emily's face as they walked in the park. Their wedding, when Emily walked towards him in her white wedding gown. He felt like the happiest man in the world. The day their child was born, Emily tiredly but happily held her newborn while he was moved to tears. These fond memories seemed so ironic at the moment. Jack took a deep breath, put the baseball bat in his backpack, and walked to his car. On the drive to Mark Stevens' place, Jack's mind kept replaying images of Emily and Mark in the ballroom. Emily's bright smile, Mark's arm around her waist, their intimate whispers. Each image was like a sharp blade, stabbing deep into his heart. He tried to convince himself it was just a warning, but deep down, he knew he might do something irreparable. On the way, Jack made a special detour to a 24-hour hardware store. He bought a pair of regular work gloves and a bottle of cleaner. The clerk looks at the man who comes in the middle of the night to buy cleaning supplies in confusion, but Jack just casually says he has a burst pipe in his house. As he left the store, Jack felt a twinge of unease, knowing that this could become part of the chain of evidence, but he decided to take the risk anyway. Approaching Mark's residence, Jack parked his car 2 blocks away from his destination. He puts on his gloves, hides his baseball bat under his broad coat, and walks to the neighborhood of Mark's house. The night was deep, the streets were empty, and only the dim light cast by the street lamps added a bit of a spooky atmosphere to the silent night. Jack hid in the shadows on the corner, watching Mark's house. Just then, he saw a familiar car pull up in front of Mark's house. It was Emily's car. Jack felt a wave of vertigo, a tidal wave of anger and jealousy. He had thought Emily might just be with a friend, but now the truth was in front of him. This discovery strengthens Jack's resolve. He gripped his baseball bat tightly and slowly approached the house. Through the window, he saw a light on in the living room. His heart was racing and his palms were sweating, but his movements were unusually calm and precise. Years of experience as an engineer had accustomed him to precise calculations and calm thinking, even in such extreme situations. He went around the back of the house and found a hidden entrance. Jack has taken up locks as a hobby of his own and has studied all kinds of locks. He picked the lock easily, moving with a lightness that surprised even him. Entering the house, Jack held his breath and listened intently. He heard the sound of the TV coming from the living room and Mark's occasional laugh. Each laugh made Jack's anger grow a little more. He crept closer to the living room, baseball bat clutched in his hand. When Jack walked into the living room, Mark was sitting on the couch watching TV with his back to him. Jack raised his baseball bat, took a deep breath, and swung down hard. The moment the stick hit the back of Mark's head, Jack felt a tremor travel through his body. Mark didn't even have time to turn around before he fell to the ground, unconscious. He looked around quickly to make sure no visible evidence had been left behind. He used Mark's towel to wipe down the baseball bat and any areas where fingerprints might have been left, then began to scrutinize the scene. Jack's engineer mind began to run at high speed, calculating every detail that might have been overlooked. He checked the floor for footprints and wiped down any surfaces that might have been touched. It even occurred to him to check under Mark's nails for the possibility of scraping his skin. Having accomplished this, Jack left the house in a hurry. He carefully avoided the security cameras on the street, then returned to his car. He put the baseball bat and glove into a plastic bag to be disposed of later. Jack's hands were shaking the whole drive home. He couldn't believe he'd actually done it. He used to think he was a rational man, a law-abiding citizen, but now he's a violent criminal. The realization sent a strong wave of nausea through him. When he got home, Jack immediately rushed into the bathroom and began frantically cleaning himself. He scrubbed every inch of his skin as hard as he could, as if that would wash away his sins. The water washed over him, but it couldn't take away the fear and guilt he felt inside. After his shower, Jack double-checked his clothes to make sure there wasn't any blood. He puts everything in the washing machine and washes it on the highest temperature. Then he began to dispose of the plastic bag containing the baseball bat and glove. Jack decided to destroy this evidence completely. He sawed baseball bats into small sections and burned them in the family fireplace. The gloves, on the other hand, he cut up and mixed into the garbage. After all this, Jack sat paralyzed on the couch, feeling exhausted. He checked the time and realized Emily hadn't returned yet. It was a relief, and at the same time he felt a pang of deep sadness. Their marriage, their lives, everything had been irrevocably changed. All night, Emily didn't come back. Jack spent a sleepless night in anxiety and fear, constantly checking his cell phone in anticipation of a message from Emily or a call from the police. But the phone remained silent, a silence more disturbing than any sound. The next morning, Jack was awakened by a sharp knock on his door. He opened the door to find two police officers standing in the doorway. They introduced themselves as Detective Johnson and Detective Rodriguez. "Mr. Thompson," Detective Johnson said, "we need to talk to you. Your wife Emily is in the hospital and she witnessed a serious assault last night." Jack felt a wave of vertigo. Trying to keep his composure, he asked, "Is Emily okay? What happened?" Detective Rodriguez replied, "Your wife is uninjured, but she is in a state of extreme shock. Mr. Mark Stevens was attacked in his home last night and is in critical condition. Emily was on the scene, and she is the one who called the police." Jack tried to control his expression, feigning surprise and concern. "God, this is horrible. Can I go check on Emily?" "Sure," Johnson said. "But before we do, we need to ask you a few questions. Where were you last night?" Jack took a deep breath and began to tell his carefully prepared story. He said he went home early because he wasn't feeling well and then stayed home. He showed recordings from the home security cameras to prove he was home all night. The detectives carefully recorded Jack's statement and then told him he could go to the hospital to see Emily. They reminded Jack to contact them immediately if he recalled any information that might be relevant to the case. At the hospital, Jack meets Emily. She looked pale and weak, with fear in her eyes. When she saw Jack, tears flowed uncontrollably. "Jack," Emily choked out, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have gone to Mark's. I just wanted to talk to him and end this." But, Jack interrupted her and whispered, "Shh, don't talk about that now. You need to rest." Emily nodded and closed her eyes. Jack sat beside her, his heart filled with mixed emotions. He felt guilt, fear, but also a twinge of vengeful pleasure. He knew that his behavior was unforgivable, but seeing Emily in such pain gave him a twisted sense of satisfaction deep inside. Over the next few days, the police came to question Jack and Emily several times. Each time, Jack repeats the same story, acting calm and concerned. His engineer's mind helped him memorize every detail and ensure consistency in every presentation. Emily seemed to be in some kind of trance and was unable to clearly describe the events of the night. She became anxious every time the police asked for details. Jack didn't know just how much she had seen, and the uncertainty made him feel unusually fearful. As the investigation progresses, Jack becomes increasingly concerned that he will be found out. He began to research how to destroy more possible evidence and how to create more alibis for himself. He even considered leaving the city, but feared that doing so would arouse suspicion. Every night, Jack wakes up with nightmares about being arrested by the police or seeing Mark's bloody face. He began to lose sleep and was often distracted at work. His co-workers noticed his abnormality, but chalked it up to concern about what had happened to his wife. Meanwhile, Emily gradually recovers from her shock. She began to recall more details, but still seemed to be in the dark about the identity of her attacker. Jack felt a pang every time he heard her describe that night. He didn't know how much longer he could hide the truth. As time passes, the police investigation seems to have reached a stalemate. There is no hard evidence pointing to any suspects. Jack was beginning to think he might have actually gotten away with it. He begins to think about how to rebuild his life and how to handle his relationship with Emily. As Emily recovers from the hospital, the relationship between Jack and her becomes incredibly strained. Although Emily admits her mistake and says she wants to return to a normal life, Jack's trust is gone. Their marital relationship was at an impasse amidst continued suspicion and misunderstanding. Emily's first day home was extraordinarily awkward. Jack tried to be thoughtful and caring, but there was always a hint of coldness and distance in his eyes. Emily notices this, but she doesn't know how to break the invisible barrier. "Jack," Emily spoke carefully, "can we talk?" Jack looked up and forced a smile. "Sure. What do you want to talk about?" Emily took a deep breath. "I know I made a huge mistake. I shouldn't have gotten together with Mark, much less kept it from you. I'm really sorry." Jack was silent for a moment, then said, "Emily, I understand your apology, but understanding and forgiveness are two different things. I need time." Emily nodded, tears in her eyes. She knew that rebuilding trust would be a long and difficult process. Over the next few days, Jack and Emily tried to get back to their normal lives. They ate together, took care of the kids together, but there was always a sense of detachment from each other that couldn't be ignored. Jack would often sit alone in his study in the dead of night, reflecting on that terrible night with a mixture of conflict and self-loathing. One evening, as Jack was once again sitting alone in his study, Emily knocked softly on the door. "Come in," Jack said. Emily walked into the room, hesitated, and then said, "Jack, I know you're still mad at me, but we can't keep going on like this. The kids are already starting to notice the problems between us." Jack sighed, "I know, but every time I see you, I remember that night. I don't know how to get rid of that feeling." Emily walked over to Jack and gently touched his shoulder. "Maybe we should seek professional help. How about seeing a marriage counselor?" Jack considered this for a moment and finally nodded. Maybe it's the only way out for them. The next day, Jack and Emily made an appointment with a marriage counselor. During counseling, they are encouraged to express their feelings. Jack confesses his anger and sense of betrayal, while Emily expresses her remorse and desire to rebuild her relationship. The counselor suggests that they try exercises to rebuild trust, such as taking time each day to have deep conversations or scheduling special date nights. Jack and Emily agree to try these methods, although Jack is still skeptical inside. However, as time goes on, Jack finds it harder and harder to shake off the shadow of that night. He begins to wonder if he can really forgive Emily. Every time he saw an image of Emily and Mark together flash through his mind, he felt a sharp pang of anger and pain. Meanwhile, Emily is trying to adjust to her new life. She quit her lab job to focus on her family. One day, when Jack comes home from work, he finds Emily in the kitchen preparing dinner. It was a customary part of their marriage, but since that incident, such scenes had become rarer and rarer. "Today's dinner is your favorite roast chicken," Emily said with a smile. Jack nodded, forcing a smile. He knows Emily is trying to fix their relationship, but some part of him still can't quite accept it. After dinner, as they were cleaning up the dishes together, Emily suddenly said. "Jack, I know you're still struggling, but I want you to know that no matter how long it takes, I'm always here. I love you, and I'll do anything to save our marriage." Jack stopped what he was doing and turned to face Emily. He saw the sincerity and determination in her eyes. In that moment, he realized that despite everything that had happened, he still loved Emily. "I love you too, Emily," Jack said softly, "but I don't know if we'll ever get over this. Sometimes love isn't enough." There was a flash of pain in Emily's eyes, but she quickly hid it. "I understand," she said, "but we can work together, one step at a time." Just then, their oldest daughter Sophie walked into the kitchen. "Dad, Mom, are you guys okay?" she asked, worry in her eyes. Jack and Emily exchanged a look. Then Jack knelt down and gently hugged Sophie. "We're fine, honey. Daddy and Mommy were just discussing some adult things." Sophie nodded, but her eyes showed that she wasn't entirely convinced. Jack and Emily both realized that their problems were not only affecting each other, but the children as well. That night, Jack sat alone on the balcony, thinking about their future. He knew that it was not good for anyone to continue like this. He needs to make a decision whether to forgive Emily and start over or end the marriage. After a long period of reflection, Jack finally made his decision. He decided to file for divorce. Though he still loves Emily, he realizes that some hurts can't be fully healed. He hoped that with this decision they would both be reborn, and perhaps at some point in the future they would even become friends. The next morning, Jack told Emily about his decision. Emily breaks down, crying and pleading, but Jack's resolve is set. He explained that it was good for both of them and that they needed time and space to heal. Over the next few weeks, Jack began the process of getting a divorce. He offered to get custody of the children so they could continue to live in the home. He agreed to give Emily visitation rights and promised not to stop her from seeing the kids. Emily was initially opposed to divorce, but over time she came to accept this reality as well. She realized that perhaps it was indeed for the best. She moved out of her home, rented a small apartment, and began to reprogram her life. Throughout the process, Jack continues to reflect on his life and marriage. He realizes that while Emily's betrayal was the immediate cause of the marriage's breakdown, their problems have been there for a long time. Years of neglect and miscommunication also contributed to this outcome. Eventually, the divorce proceedings were finalized. Jack and Emily stood outside the courthouse, looking at each other, both feeling a strange sense of relief. "I want you to be happy, Emily," Jack said sincerely. Emily nodded, tears in her eyes. "You too, Jack. I'm really sorry for letting things get to this point." Jack gently shook Emily's hand. "We're all responsible. The important thing is that we can all move on now." When they parted, Jack felt an inexplicable relief. Although the future was still full of uncertainty, he knew that the decision was the right one. He's ready to start a new chapter in his life and hopes Emily finds happiness of her own. A few months later, Mark Stevens finally woke up from his coma. However, the doctors were surprised to find that he had lost all memory of that night. Regardless of police questioning, Mark was unable to recall the face of his assailant or any pertinent details. As the news reached Jack's ears, he felt a wave of mixed emotions rush over him. Guilt, fear, all sorts of feelings intertwined. He realizes that he may never be brought to justice for his actions that night. However, escaping punishment doesn't bring Jack the relief he thought it would. On the contrary, the condemnation of conscience followed him like a shadow, tormenting him day and night. Whenever he was alone, that violent night would always replay in his mind, making him sit up and take notice. Although Emily was not directly involved in the violence, she knows that her infidelity was at the root of it all. The shadow of betrayal hangs over her, making it difficult for her to find true happiness in her new life. One day, Jack stumbles upon a news story in the newspaper about a couple that ends up in tragedy because of the betrayal of one of the partners. The news struck a nerve somewhere deep inside Jack. He began to think deeply about his experience and the damage this event had done to all involved. Jack realizes that while Emily's betrayal caused him great pain, his violence was equally wrong. The two mistakes piled on top of each other not only destroyed their marriage, but also caused irreparable damage to their children. Not to mention Mark Stevens, who, despite his involvement in the affair, should not have to suffer such severe physical injuries and memory loss. This realization made Jack determined to turn his experience into a warning to others. He began anonymously sharing his story in online forums, telling people about the terrible consequences of betrayal and violent retaliation. He writes, "Betrayal is a double-edged sword that not only hurts the betrayed party, but ultimately hurts the betrayer himself. And choosing to retaliate with violence only makes it worse. Both betrayal and retaliation cause unbearable pain for all involved." Jack's post resonated and was widely discussed. Many people shared their similar experiences. Some decided to cherish their existing relationships as a result, while others said Jack's story made them give up on the idea of revenge. Emily saw Jack's post too. Even though Jack used an alias, she recognized it as their story from the details. It made her realize once again the serious consequences of her actions in a profound way. She decided to take action as well and began organizing lectures at universities to speak to young people about the importance of loyalty and trust in relationships. As time passes, both Jack and Emily struggle to make up for past mistakes in their respective lives. They may never be able to fully forgive each other or themselves, but they strive to turn this painful experience into a positive force that alerts others and redeems them. In the end, Jack realizes a profound truth. A truly strong man is not one who can inflict revenge, but one who can maintain his sanity and dignity in the face of betrayal. Likewise, Emily recognizes that a moment of weakness and betrayal can lead to irreversible consequences. Their story becomes a living example that warns people to think twice before facing relationship problems. Whether you are considering betrayal or revenge, you should be thoughtful and weigh the pros and cons, as these actions can change the course of multiple people's lives forever. In relationships, honesty, trust, and forgiveness are far more likely to bring true happiness and peace than betrayal and revenge. Though they paid a heavy price to comprehend this truth, they hope that by sharing their story, they can help others avoid making the same mistake. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to share about your own or someone else's experience, please feel free to contact me. Take care.